Okay, continuing on with Richard Tarnas, Cosmos and Psyche from page now 26, which is after Forging the Self, Disenchanting the World. It's at the end of the first chapter, and it's a section called The Cosmological Situation Today. And it goes for about the same amount of time, and it goes as follows. In the course of the past century, the modern worldview has seen both its greatest ascendancy and its unexpected breakdown. Every field and discipline, from philosophy, anthropology, and linguistics to physics, ecology, and medicine, has brought forth new data and new perspectives that have challenged long-established assumptions and strategies of the modern mind. This challenge has been considerably magnified and made more urgent by the multitude of concrete consequences produced by those assumptions and strategies, many of them problematic. As of the first decade of the new millennium, almost every defining attitude of the modern worldview has been critically reassessed and deconstructed. They're often not relinquished, even when failure to do so is costly. The result in our own postmodern time, has been a state of extraordinary intellectual ferment and fragmentation, fluidity and uncertainty. Ours is an age between worldviews, creative yet disoriented, a transitional era when the old cultural vision no longer holds and the new has not yet constellated. Yet we are not without signs of what the new might look like. Recently, there have been emerging from the deconstructive flux of the postmodern mind the tentative outlines of a new understanding of reality, one very different from the conventional modern view. Impelled by developments in many fields, this shift in intellectual vision has encompassed a wide range of ideas and principles, among which can be identified a few common themes. Perhaps the most conspicuous and pervasive of these can be summed up as a deeper appreciation of both the multidimensional complexity of reality and the plurality of perspectives necessary to approach it. Closely related to this new appreciation, as both cause and effect, is a critical reappraisal of the epistemological limits and pragmatic consequences of the conventional scientific approach to knowledge. This reappraisal includes a more acute sensitivity to the ways in which subject and object are mutually implicated in the act of knowing, a revised understanding of the relationship of whole and part in all phenomena, a new grasp of complex interdependence and subtle order in living systems, and an acknowledgement of the inadequacy of reductionist, mechanistic, and objectified concepts of nature. Other major characteristics of this emerging intellectual vision include a deeper understanding of the pivotal role of the imagination in mediating all human experience and knowledge, an increased awareness of the depth, power, and complexity of the unconscious, and a more sophisticated analysis of the nature of symbolic, metaphoric, and archetypal meaning in human life. Behind many of these themes can be seen a rejection of all literalistic and univocal interpretations of reality, of the tendency, as Robert Bellah has put it, to identify one conception of reality with reality itself. Equally fundamental to this shift is a growing recognition of the need for and desirability of a radical opening of the mainstream Western intellectual and cultural tradition to the rich multiplicity of other traditions and perspectives that have evolved both within the West and in other cultures. Yet this emphatic embrace of pluralism has been balanced by, and to a great extent been in service of, a profound impulse for reintegration, a widely felt desire to overcome the fragmentation and alienation of the late modern mind. Underlying the variety of its expressions, the most distinctive trait of this new vision has been its concern with the philosophical and psychological reconciliation of numerous long-standing schisms between human being and nature, self and world, spirit and matter, mind and body, conscious and unconscious, personal and transpersonal, secular and sacred, intellect and soul, science and the humanities, science and religion. For some time, this emerging consensus of convictions and aspirations has seemed to me, as to many others, the most interesting and hopeful intellectual development of our age, and perhaps the only most likely to produce a viable successor to the rapidly deteriorating modern worldview. Yet, from its beginning, this new vision or paradigm has confronted a seemingly insurmountable problem. The present world situation could hardly be more ripe for a major paradigm shift. And many thoughtful observers have concluded that such a shift, when it comes, should, and very probably will, be based on principles resembling those just cited. But to succeed in becoming a broad-based cultural vision, or even to achieve its own implicit program of psychological and intellectual integration, this new outlook has been lacking one essential element, the sine qua non of any genuinely comprehensive, internally consistent worldview: a coherent cosmology. In retrospect, it is evident that the fundamental intellectual turning point of Western civilization was the Copernican Revolution, understood in its largest sense. Nothing so effectively bestowed confidence in the supreme power of human reason. Nothing so emphatically and comprehensively affirmed the superiority of the modern Western mind over all others, all other worldviews, all other eras, all other cultures, all other modes of cognition. Nothing emancipated the modern self from a cosmos of previously established and pre-given meanings more profoundly or more dramatically. It is impossible to think of the modern mind without the Copernican Revolution. Yet the luminosity of that great revolution has cast an extraordinary shadow. The radical displacement of the Earth and humanity from an absolute cosmic center, the stunning transference of the apparent cosmic order from the observed to the observer, and the eventual pervasive disenchantment of the material universe were all paradigmatic for the modern mind. And these have now come to epitomize humankind's underlying sense of disorientation and alienation. With the heavens no longer a separate divine realm, and the earth no longer embedded in a circumscribed celestial order of planetary spheres and powers, humanity was simultaneously liberated from and thrust out of the ancient medieval cosmic womb. The essential nature of reality underwent an immense shift for the Western mind, which now engaged a world possessed of entirely new dimensions, structure, and existential implications. For all the exalted numinosity of the Copernican birth, the new universe that eventually emerged into the light of common day, was a spiritually empty vastness, impersonal, neutral, indifferent to human concerns, governed by random processes devoid of purpose or meaning. At a deep level, human consciousness was thereby radically estranged and decentered. It no longer experienced itself as an essential expression and focus of an intrinsically meaningful universe. Before the Copernican Revolution, wrote Bertrand Russell, it was natural to suppose that God's purposes were specially concerned with the earth. But now this has become an unplausible hypothesis. Man must instead be regarded as a curious accident. The Copernican Revolution was the Copernican Revolution was the modern mind's prototypical act of deconstruction, bringing both a birth and a death. It was the primordial cataclysm of the modern age, a stupendous event which destroyed an entire world and constituted a new one. Not only the subsequent evolution of modern cosmology, from Newton and Laplace to Einstein and Hubble, but virtually the entire modern intellectual trajectory has sustained and magnified the primary Copernican insight. Descartes, Locke, Hume, Kant, Schopenhauer, Darwin, Marx, Nietzsche, Weber, Freud, Wittgenstein, Russell, Heidegger, Sartre, and Camus. From 17th century rationalism and empiricism to 20th century existentialism and astrophysics, human consciousness has found itself progressively emancipated, yet also progressively relativized, unrooted, inwardly isolated from the spiritually opaque world it seeks to comprehend. The soul knows no home in the modern cosmos. The status of the human being in its cosmic setting is fundamentally problematic. Solitary, accidental, ephemeral, inexplicable. The profound uniqueness and autonomy of man have come at a high price. He is an insignificant speck cast adrift in a vast purposeless cosmos, a stranger in a strange land. Self-reflective human consciousness finds no foundation for itself in the empirical world. Inner and outer psyche and cosmos are radically discontinuous, mutually incoherent. As Steven Weinberg famously summarized modern cosmology, the more the universe seems comprehensible, the more it also seems pointless. With the encompassing cosmos indifferent to human meaning, all the significance deriving ultimately from the decentered and accidental human subject, a meaningful world can never be more than a courageous human projection. Thus did the Copernican Revolution establish the essential matrix for the modern worldview in all its disenchanting ramifications. The most celebrated of human intellectual achievements, it remains the watershed of human alienation, the epochal symbol of humanity's cosmic estrangement. Here we face the crux of our present predicament, for it is this post-Copernican cosmological context that continues to frame the current effort to forge a new paradigm of reality. Yet that context, utterly at variance with the deep transformations now being urged, thereby confounds them. Although many of the post-Copernican ramifications, Cartesian, Kantian, Darwinian, and Freudian, have been grappled with, criticized, and reconceived to one extent or another, the great starting point for the whole trajectory of modern consciousness remains untouched. The cosmological metastructure that implicitly contained and precipitated all the rest is still so solidly established as to be beyond discussion. The physical sciences of the past 100 years have flung open wide the nature of reality, dissolving all the old absolutes. But the Earth still moves, along with now everything else, in a postmodern explosion of centerless, free-floating flux. Newton has been transcended, but not Copernicus, who has rather been extended in every direction, in every dimension. For all the notable strides made in deconstructing the modern mind and moving towards a new vision, whether in science, philosophy, or religion, nothing has come close to questioning the larger Copernican revolution itself, the modern mind's first principle and foundation. The very idea is as inconceivable now as was the idea of a moving Earth before 1500. That most fundamental modern revolution, along with its deepest existential consequences, still prevails, subtly yet globally determining the character of the contemporary mind. The continuing implacable reality of a purposeless cosmos places an effective glass ceiling on all attempts to reconstruct or soften the various alienating post-Copernican ramifications, from Descartes' subject-object dualism to Darwin's blind evolution. A straight line of disenchantment extends from astronomy and biology to philosophy and religion, as in Jacques Monod's well-known synopsis of the human condition in the later 20th century. Quote, "The ancient covenant is in pieces. Man knows at last that he is alone in the universe's unfeeling immensity, out of which he emerged only by chance." From the cosmological perspective, the various movements now pressing for the creation of a more humanly meaningful and spiritually resonant world have been taking place in an atomistic void. In the absence of some unprecedented development beyond the existential framework defined by the larger Copernican revolution, these less primordial intellectual challenges can never be more than brave interpretive exercises in an alien cosmic environment. No amount of revisioning philosophy or psychology, science or religion can forge a new worldview without a radical shift at the cosmological level. As it now stands, our cosmic context does not support the attempted transformation of human vision. No genuine synthesis seems possible. This enormous contradiction that invisibly encompasses the emerging paradigm is precisely what is preventing that paradigm from constituting a coherent and effective worldview. As a long line of thinkers from Pascal to Nietzsche have recognized, the cosmic spaces of meaningless vastness that surround the human world silently oppose and subvert the meaning of the human world itself. In such a context, all human imagination, all religious experience, all moral and spiritual values can only too readily be seen as idiosyncratic human constructs. Despite the many profound and indispensable changes that have taken place in the contemporary Western mind, the larger cosmological situation continues to sustain and enforce the basic double bind of our modern consciousness. Our deepest spiritual and psychological aspirations are fundamentally incoherent with the very nature of the cosmos as revealed by the modern mind. Quote, not only are we not at the center of the cosmos, wrote Primo Levi, but we are alien to it. We are a singularity. The universe is strange to us. We are strange in the universe. The distinctive pathos and paradox of our cosmological situation reflects a deep historical schism within modern culture and the modern sensibility. For the modern experience of a radical division between inner and outer, of a subjective, personal, and purposeful consciousness that is incongruously embedded in and evolved from an objective universe that is unconscious, impersonal, and purposeless, is precisely represented in the cultural polarity and tension of our history between Romanticism and the Enlightenment. Let me repeat that. The distinctive pathos and paradox of our cosmological situation reflects a deep historical schism within modern culture and the modern sensibility. Quote, for the modern experience of a radical division between inner and outer, of a subjective, personal, and purposeful consciousness that is incongruously embedded in and evolved from an objective universe that is unconscious, impersonal, and purposeless. For the modern experience of a radical division between inner and outer is precisely represented in the cultural polarity and tension in our history between Romanticism and the Enlightenment. On the one side of this divide, our interior selves hold precious our spiritual intuitions, our moral and aesthetic sensibilities, our devotion to love and beauty, the power of the creative imagination, our music and poetry, our metaphysical reflections and religious experiences, our visionary journeys, our glimpses of an ensouled nature, our inward conviction that the deepest truth can be found within. This interior impulse has been carried in modern culture by Romanticism, understood in its broadest sense from Rousseau and Goethe, Wordsworth and Emerson, all the way through to its spirited Renaissance, democratized and globalized in the post-60s counterculture. In the romantic impulse and tradition, the modern soul found profound psychological and spiritual expression. On the other side of the schism, the soul has dwelled within a universe whose essential nature was fully determined and defined by the scientific revolution and Enlightenment. In effect, the objective world has been ruled by the Enlightenment, the subjective world by Romanticism. Together, these have constituted the modern worldview and the complex modern sensibility. One could say that the modern world's sustaining allegiance has been to Romanticism, whereas the modern mind's deeper loyalty has been to the Enlightenment. Both live within us, fully yet antithetically. An impossible tension of opposites thereby resides deep in the modern sensibility. hence the underlying pathos of the modern situation. The biography of the modern soul has taken place completely within a disenchanted Enlightenment cosmos, thereby contextualizing and rendering the entire life and striving of the modern soul as merely subjective. Our spiritual being, our psychology, is contradicted by our cosmology. Our romanticism is contradicted by our enlightenment, our inner by our outer. And I think I want to break this up as much as possible. So I'm going to return with the second half of this section, which is called the cosmological situation today.